Hi there.
Morning.
Are live and it's Wednesday, so we're happy to be here. We're Dave and Laura Butler of Work Life Consulting, and we love to jump in and talk about topics of interest to us and interest of those we hear from. Today is a celebration of International Women's Day. We thought we'd take some time and focus in on that topic. Before we go any further, we want to share with you our revised promo video that sort of captures a little bit of what we do when we get that question of what do you do? So here we go. Enjoy.
We're in it together. We're in it together. If you get off track, I got your back. Remember. Oh yeah, we're in this together.
And you know what else is fun about that is that's our good friend Eliot Lewis, and his music is outstanding. And I can't think of a better way to describe what we like to do with our clients is say we're in this together. You know, this is, we don't step in as the Bobs, as we used to be called, from Office Space, or that we have all the answers to everything. We provide sort of what we always say is the mirror to help people see what they need to see within themselves.
And
So,
help
what
people
would
have
you
the
add to that?
conversations they need to have.
Yes, exactly. So, in light of, as I said in the very beginning, International Women's Day, I thought this was the way to capture it. It's a long and winding road.
Look out.
So, yeah, Paul McCartney would be could be back up next
Long and winding
to this,
road.
to
Yeah,
this one. But first, I want
definitely.
to say if you're joining us live, thank you for joining us. If you're listening to the recording, thank you for joining us. Any comments, we'd love to hear from you. What are some of the things, what has been your journey? Now, this is not only for women, even though it's International Women's Day today. I think the celebration of how we elevate women is because there's partnership with men. So it's not just a silo, and we're going to get into silos in just a minute. But the history, which is interesting, if you look back, this was back in 1975, where the actual official celebration was adopted by the United Nations as a worldwide celebration of women's rights. And I think it's interesting to highlight worldwide. I remember, though, 1975 was like yesterday compared to what I went through in the 60s. So you and I were talking a little bit about that this morning. You know, what were some of the things that I experienced? And, I can't say that it was something that was even, how old are you? 18, 16. These are the kinds of things. Yeah, okay, maybe one day that'll affect me. But what I remember, because I came from a large family, 3 girls and 3 boys, I remember that it was there was a focus of helping the boys go through college and not the girls.
Hmm.
And so I guess my push with my parents was I'm getting out of where I live. I just wanted to get to someplace different. And I really didn't have a set plan in place because there were no real role models. There were no discussions about that in my household. Uh, but I wanted to go to Boston. That was, I knew there were a lot of schools in Boston. So, yeah, that sounds like a good place. So that was basically it. How about you?
Nice quiet place where nothing's going on.
Yeah, yeah.
You
But
got
you
the
had
68, and there were protests going on, and there were people in the streets, and
yeah. I
there were
mean,
marches
and
going
also,
on.
yeah, also separate from, but kind of related to, there was the Vietnam War going on. So the
Hmm.
idea of protests and speaking up and kind of getting into the march, if you will, was second nature. I think
Yeah.
that's what I remember more than anything.
Yeah.
But you have a sister, so what did you hear in your household?
Growing up, I never really heard much about there was any difference because my mom worked full time. My dad was disabled, so she was pretty much the breadwinner and left every day and came home every day and did all of the other things that she had to do. So my sister and I were equals. There was no real demarcation about anything. And I went off to school. She went off to school. She went into the Navy. I went into the theater. I mean, we had very different lives, but I think our expectations were we're going to go and do whatever it is we want to do. But when you get out there, you find that there's not the same equality that you thought that there should be. But by the time I got out into the workforce in the early 70s, the ERA was already on everybody's lips. It seemed to me like that was going to pass. And it seemed to me that the momentum of what was going on was in the right direction, that things were going to get cleared up, that we're going to get the laws passed, that we're going to make sure that things were equal. And then all of a sudden became the 80s, and then it became the 90s. And I'm looking around, I'm like, hello? Yeah, I thought we were on the track here. Talking about a long and winding road. Well, it's more than a long and winding road. Somewhere we pulled over to the scenic overlook or something because, what happened? There was an awful lot of steam, and now all of a sudden it's still there. We're still having conversations about this. I think,
Yeah.
I thought we were done with this.
Well, what happens is the needle doesn't move very far. That's for sure. And the other piece that happened a few years ago, there was, and I found an interesting article this morning where the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are losing momentum. So this is what the article said, that many companies, and the reason that in this article, as we, I did a lot of work with the Healthcare Businesswomen's Association, where this DEI is a huge focus, and we help the healthcare organizations to kind of target how do they approach this, how do they line it up. And what this article was focusing on is that they're making the mistake of siloing it.
Yeah.
So the communication is one path, and it's not complementary to other initiatives, programs that are
integrated.
Yes, it's not
integrated. It needs to be integrated, because if not, DEI is looking for a place to die. And so it's going to start pulling off to the scenic overlook like everything else. And pretty soon you got the silo and the department. The worst thing would be to have the DEI to the hierarchy. Talk about slowing down momentum. You might as well come to a standstill.
Yeah. So the idea, what happened too, is there's another piece of the article where employees who work in these specific fields of DE&I are the retention is lower than those in other areas. So I thought that was, the attrition's higher. So that's an interesting piece.
Surprise, surprise, probably a frustration, because you can only push on the wall for so long, and then the wall wins.
Yeah.
Well,
the article also, these are the things that need to happen to regain. And I think couldn't agree more. Our favorite, one of our favorite thought leaders, Don Tapscott, talked about the principles of openness. And one of them was transparency. So even if things aren't going so well and our numbers aren't as high as we'd like, and the stats are dropping, share it. Share it with the company. And I would imagine that people would have ideas that goes along with accountability that would help to boost those numbers, or at least figure out why is it going down? Why are some of and the other piece is there's not an ongoing education around it. It's not just deliver, what's going on. So that's where we get the buy-in, and the buy-in has to be from the top.
Yeah.
Otherwise it dies.
Well, I think, again, talking about transparency, it sounds great, but it's so hard to do. Nobody wants to look at the dirty clothes. Yeah. Until you pull that out, along with everything else, it's easy to pull out things that look good. Well, look, we accomplished this new program. Well, what about all the stuff that we didn't do? until we look at some of the failures and we're willing to be transparent about the things that don't work, I think that's what gets in the way. It's just a lot of debris in the wake. But also
Yeah.
the issue of coming from the top. I think some of the best initiatives that we've done over the last couple of years, where nations focused in on having male allies. This is not a woman's problem. This is a people problem, and we need to do it together.
Right.
You can't. You got to have the men involved in it, and until the men start waking up and seeing what's going on and desire it, because they see that it improves business, it's good for the health of the company, it's good for the culture, it's good for retention. I mean, all the things that the DE and I can help with.
Yes.
But as long as we're trying to fix the past or something, it doesn't make any sense. We got to find a way to get it in the drinking water.
Right. Well, and the other thing that I think supports this that you and I have created is a women's leadership program, and this was based on research through Harvard, where the ideas of what needs to happen is creating what the author Herminia Barra calls safe identity workspaces,
Mm-hmm.
and so to your point about male allies, her point is first the women meet and share with each other
Mm-hmm.
successes, things that didn't go as well, and have that safe space first, and then invite men into the conversation
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
they're different viewpoints of how we see success and how we see challenges. But
Yeah.
then you can share them together, and it becomes a whole lot of a bigger game. But I think
Yeah.
too, for women to be successful and for women to own this DEI, to step up, the program we created is stand up, speak up, step up, wake up to your potential. So that
Mm-hmm.
sounds easy or great. But how do you do that? Well, number one, you have to be authentic and step into your own identity
Yeah.
by answering the question, who are you?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that also along with that, then the next thing is, what do you want? And being able to figure out and be clear about that and make presentations and express your feelings. I think one of the things that's best about Hermione's work was talking about leadership competencies. We talk a lot about leadership in our work, and the competencies that are there, the ones that are usually described by companies, if you look at them, they're actually describing male leadership. And until we find a way to rework those competencies so that gender, there won't be like much headway. So presenting, expressing, what do you want? Well, what does it look like is a good question to ask here too. What
Right.
does it actually look like to have DE&I in an organization?
Well, here's an interesting question from our colleague Jeff Levin. What are some of the typical management objections to supporting DE&I? And
No time.
I think yeah. I mean, it's the
It's a
same
good
old,
one. No time.
yeah, with everything that is out there, all the initiatives, what it's almost what boils to the top.
Yeah.
What's the most pressing?
Yeah,
So
that
in
sounds
terms of,
great, Laura. But right now we're in the middle of so
yeah,
much change. Well, we'll get to that when things settle down.
right,
Settle
right.
down. Well, that's
Well, I
yeah.
think yeah, and the other piece is when you start to look at what takes a priority, what is the front row and what takes a back seat.
Mm-hmm.
It's you go back to the Hermenia discussion about leadership competencies.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes the how do we decide is the question.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, there's no question about DE and I. And these are also, if we start looking at some of these topics around generational differences, the
Mm-hmm.
millennial generation is also thinking about this as purpose. So
Mm-hmm.
this idea of DE&I, if I can bring my best self to work, regardless of how you identify gender wise,
Mm-hmm.
and that is not an issue, and there's no feeling of I can't really be me,
Mm-hmm.
that's the answer right there. And Jeff also says, I imagine it's hard to see the short timer or time cost benefit, the short time cost benefit. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think totally agree, Jeff. And I think the short win is that retention.
Yeah, I was
piece.
just going to say, that today it's become such a hot topic, being able to hold on to anybody, any talent at all, but especially if you're in an organization or a culture that does not have steps. The young people are not going to stay.
Right. What? So what do you want? And then where are you going? Which would be the accountability and resilience. So that
Mhm.
the where are you going, you put a plan in place and stick with it. That's where the resilience comes in. And the plan could
Mhm.
be, I'm going to own this for my company. And I'm going
Mhm.
to make sure that this doesn't fall by the wayside. I'm going to shout out to a fabulous colleague of ours, Aida Sabo, who has spent her whole career
Mhm.
on this DEI
Mhm.
topic. And she talk about resilience. She does not, not give up and created wonderful opportunities for people in the organizations where she's worked.
Yeah, and I
So
think
thank you.
the accountability idea will change a lot when people have performance reviews that have 10% of their increase tied to DE&I improvement.
Right,
Where's the
right,
where are the KPIs on DEI?
right, right.
Where are the percentages? Where are the bonuses that are in place? That's follow the money, as Peter Drucker said a long time ago.
Yeah. And then the final one is how do you get there? You need to know what's the clarity. If I have a sense of purpose, what does it look like? How do I collaborate with others with make that to make that happen?
Mhm.
And the final piece that I always like to share is my favorite quote. If it's to be, it's up to me. And to your point, it's men, it's women. If something is starting to fall by the wayside, it's important to jump in and find a way to make that happen. And that's my mini closing. This is my major closing. Stop apologizing. This, to me, this is the biggest celebration of International Women's Day. And this is one of the topics in our women's program where the women are introduced to the concept and start to realize how many times they apologize for insignificant matters that don't warrant apology.
Opening the door,
Yeah, it's just a habit. It's a
walking
habit.
into the room.
And then thanks to everybody for listening today. I'm going to close with our dear friend Oprah. Step out of the history that's holding you back and step into the new story you are willing to create. So it's all about that story and how you see it unfold. Any closing comments, Dave?
Just write the story the way you want the show to go.
Absolutely. And for those of you who would like to reach out and contact us in any way, it's worklifeonline.com. Jump onto our list, ask us any questions, share a comment, topic, and so forth. But thanks for listening. And we will wrap up with our friend Eliot Lewis of eliotlewis.com again, because it's such a great closing to say that we are in this together. Thanks for listening.